Right, guys, I want to talk to you today about whether the history of Japanese swordsmanship is important or not. Can you please support me by getting a copy of this, How to Be a Modern Samurai, by Anthony Cummins? It will, if you're into samurai stuff, it will help you and it'll help me. Okay, right. So my question is a little bit clickbaity, but there's a purpose for it, and that is Japanese swordsmanship actually important? But what I mean by this is it important for the questions I am trying to answer? Now, my main question in life is, what did the samurai and shinobi really do? What did they actually do? And I've decided there's a sort of cut-off date of about 1600 for my personal research, because we're talking about mainly the warring periods of the samurai, when we want to know what they actually did. Now, we know there's more conflict later on, but what I am talking about is what everybody imagines is samurai in battle, samurai at war, samurai in military campaigns, samurai with mass hoarded armies, samurai in the early days in the epics, and all of that. I'll talk about the end of samurai times in a bit. So, when you delve into samurai swordsmanship, you basically get bombarded with about 1 million people who are saying, well, this school's that, and that school's joined to them, and this is this, Waza, and that's that. And literally within moments, you can be bamboozled unless it's your school, unless your only quest in life is to know about the different lineages, the different people, the different concepts. And basically, you suddenly get swallowed by what is essentially not important information, to discover how the samurai were fighting at Sekigahara, in the Onin War, when Nobunaga was invading Iga, when he was fighting the monks of Mount Hiei. How are we fighting? How are the samurai fighting when Minamoto no Yoshitsune was invaded? Fighting across his ships, or when he's crashing down the mountainside, going to invade a fortress from the rear. What's actually happening with swordsmanship or spear combat and things like that? So this is the big problem. Very quickly, people talk about samurai swordsmanship from about 1550 to 1850, 1870. Now, and that is probably non-representative of the first half of samurai life. So if we want to know how the samurai dealt with swordsmanship in the Edo period, it's quite easy. There's tons of information. We know what's going on. We've got school listings. It's not, we know there's a move towards more Zen-like swordsmanship. We know there's a move towards more sportsmanship-like swordsmanship, sportsman-like swordsmanship. We know that they definitely are using it in duels and combat, one-on-one in the street with just clothes. We know that there's a rise towards the end of the Edo period where swords are in use again. So, but it's not really our archetype of the samurai from the first half, from the year 1000 to 1500, 1550, is what are these samurai doing when they are fighting from horseback. After bows have been shot, they're fighting from horseback. What's happening when we're in the Sengoku period, Onin War Sengoku period, when the battlefields are getting closer and people are starting using more on-foot tactics with with swords that are becoming shorter, but they're still big, hefty weapons. Compared to as it gets lighter further on. That's basically the reason I'm stopping there is because there's actually multiple things off that. So, but you get my point. Originally, we've got these nodachi, big, massive things from horseback. People are jumping off horses and swiping, and then swords started getting shorter, compacter, hard, more robust and like just smashing through things. Uchigatana, basically. What is happening then? We know the gun comes in, and the gun comes in and changes Japanese warfare forever. But there's a problem here, is that after the gun comes in, we see, and because Oda Nobunaga is unifying everybody, and everybody's coming together, we're seeing a unification of swordsmanship as well. It's not by mistake that Japan is unified, and then the swordsmanship of Japan tends to be very, very a select few of sword very select sword schools that come together and then offshoot of branches of those fundamental core styles. So the big question is, one, where are all the other styles gone? And B, what happened before these styles? Now you've got mainly, like, let's take Katori Shinto Ryu. It claims to be from the 1300s. I say claims because let's discuss that in a minute. But the point being is, like, it's not popular till a bit later on. I actually don't know when Katori Shinto Ryu becomes nationwide popular, but it does. In the end, Kashima, Katori become very famous schools that, there are offshoots all over Japan. Then, of course, you've got the Kamizumi offshoot. So Kamizumi has the Shinkage Ryu, which is the new Kage style, and he uses that. And of course, you get Taisha Ryu come off there. Please follow Taisha Ryu official, and you are on YouTube. And you also get Yagyu Shinkage Ryu, and they come off, but they're actually quite different. There are things that are similar, but they start branching out into different things. So when I am trying to say, in the Warring States period and before, what did samurai and shinobi actually do? And I try to look at the swordsmanship, you're bombarded with people saying, well, this school's here and this school's that, but like, that's not really what was happening then. Now, the reason I say Katori Shinto Ryu claims to be from this date is because I actually don't know the date it really opened. Now, the reason I'm saying that is I've done a lot of study on different Ryuha, different Japanese schools, and something that is 100% obvious is that Japanese schools, all of them, my own included, Nato Ryu, has a mythological start or a legendary start. So, for example, in Mubyoshi Ryu, they say that the dragon god came from Polaris and gave them what the information they needed to the original founder, who was in the early 1600s. So it's not claiming ancient ancestry. But Nato Ryu is claiming it goes all the way back to China. It claims it goes back through Kusunoki, Fuden, and it gives you the people. I've got the documents. It gives you all the people back all the way to these Chinese emperors and Chinese generals and everything. Like, obviously, the information maybe stemmed from bits of that, but the people are not. And realistically, it's probably started in the 1500s. But that claims to go back to, like, before the samurai. Now, of course, Katori Shinto Ryu also claims to be, the I think he's a god or an ancestor came out and taught them, how to fight. The same as some people say that the Tengu come and teach them how to fight. The main point being is, you don't just take the date of a school's start absolutely as true. It's like, this school started on this date. Not always. That's not true. It actually started on one date, but normally there's a bit before where it says, well, actually, this is our legendary story that happened. This is what we say where we came from. So if you actually took a time machine back to Sengoku period Japan, or earlier than the gun, let's say, you would go from hamlet to hamlet, from city to city, or whatever, the equivalent of the cities were then at the time. And you would probably find a horde of different types of swordsmanship. So many different types of swordsmanship going on. Different people doing different things. Obviously, there would be a universal idea of swordsmanship, but you would have this school does this, they do that, they've got this trick. And what is a problem for me is that when you try to break through that 1550s barrier, you come into very murky water where you're like, actually, we don't know. So here's one for all the people who are into swordsmanship. What is the sword style of Shinkage Ryu? Not Yagyu Shinkage Ryu. Shinkage Ryu by Kamizumi. What did he actually do? It's quite hard to find out his actual, he held it this way, he did it that way, because you only have to take two schools, Taisha Ryu and Yagyu Shinkage Ryu, and you can see similarities, but they're massively different. But you then hear them say, well, they're both from Kamizumi, and they're both within one generation of Kamizumi. So which one has got Kamizumi's actual sword handling? Or have they taken inspiration from that? We just don't know. So and then from the person Kamizumi got it from, what was that like? So within 2 or 3 generations, there's a vast difference in what claims to be the same swordsmanship from the same person. So what I'm finding is everybody's giving me a lot of top end after 1600 heavy swordsmanship history, which actually, if you just cut it off, if you get the date 1550, drop it all away, suddenly the question It's not easy to answer, but it's less bogged down in things. People start talking about. So one thing that was being said on my channel. So I've said I want to get back to how swordsmanship was actually done pre-1550, but basically pre-gun Sengoku period. And they said we should look at the late 1800s. I think Jiken is it, and the sparring and fencing. I'm like, no, because I have documentation from people saying that that was so far removed. So I have a document, or it's a book out there, you can all buy it, but basically there's a document of a swordman who's classed as one of the best swordsmen in Japan, and he said he was on a mission to fight swordsmanship in the 1800s, and he said this bouncing around and, you know, wearing armor with bamboo is just not working. That's not what swordsmanship is like in the past. Now you can take his word from it, not, but I quite agree with that. That's not what it would have been like. So simply looking at how somebody did swordsmanship in the 1800s within a sports environment, to me, doesn't tell us how samurai were really using it on the battlefield in 1550. So for me, I'm going to cut off everything after sort of 1550. Obviously, you know, keep a track of it, but look before that, because it just makes the path to the question simpler, safer, more direct. Okay, guys? Of course, I'm not saying that that is not important, that the second wave of schools, by second wave, I mean the Kamizumi, the Shinto, the Katori, and Kashima shrines, all of those are very important. But they are a single piece that come together and become popular after that sort of point. There's not a single line, it's a blending out. Lots of swordsmanship here, then it's that time goes on, as it gets to the 1550s, then a few come together to create the main swordsmanship schools of the early Edo, and then it spreads out again, and we get this tree shape going on. And with lots of little flowery bits over here that sort of disappeared into the mists of Japanese history that have just gone. Or they probably recorded somewhere in some vault somewhere that we're just never really going to see. So that's why, guys, I think to get to the bottom of the question, how did samurai really fight with swords on a battlefield? Well, first of all, most people died of gunshot wounds and arrow wounds. So let's go before guns. Most people died of arrow wounds, stone throwing, and that type of thing. But there are definitely deaths by sword. So how did samurai use swords before the gun modified Japanese warfare, before the second wave swordsmanship came in, if you like, or the new wave swordsmanship came in, when it was like, let's have the sword of life and the sword of death, let's have the sword of peace, let's bring peace, let's put Zen. What was it like? If I was transported and I stood next to Minamoto no Yoshitsune, and he is meant to be a masterclass swordsman, what did he do? What did he do? Nobody knows, but what can we try to piece that information back together? There you go, guys. So I'm not disrespecting, if you've seen my other videos, any of the Koryu. I'm not disrespecting the history of Japanese swordsmanship. There's some amazing piece of history out there. There's very dangerous times in the Edo period where people are dueling, but that's not the question. The question is what was happening on the battlefields, in skirmishes, in the woods, in the wilderness, on the, you know, on combat fields. What was happening then before the new wave swordsmanship? What do you think, guys? I'd love to hear your comments below, and please do, if you're interested, if you got to the end of this, guys, and you like what I'm talking about, have a look at How to Be a Modern Samurai. Get it for someone for Christmas. There you go. All right, guys, see you later.